Now everyone is ready to start. So I'll call the June 13th, 2017 meeting of the Stow Board of Selectmen into order. First thing is public input on something that's not scheduled for tonight's agenda. All right, hearing none, I will go to the chair's comments. We want to congratulate all our graduates this year from Neshoba Regional High School and Minuteman Vocational Tech. We want to laud all of the families from Stow whose graduates received special scholastic recognition, including this year's valedictorian and salutatorian at Neshoba, Jordan Bricknell, and Adira Balzac, respectively. There were plenty of other graduates who are recognized for their accomplishments in all aspects of high school achievement, and this time of year always calls to mind the wonderfully gifted and talented young adults from our town who graduate each year. We are all proud of all of you, and we especially want to congratulate the seniors in our respective schools for celebrating their graduation safely and prudently. Two other items that I want to mention, and especially bring to the attention of everyone in attendance and all those watching at home, that unfortunately did not get on the agenda tonight, but would be scheduled for our next meeting on June 27th, 2017, our jam-packed agenda next meeting. First, we are scheduled to enjoy our annual visit from state legislators, State Senator Eldridge and Representative Hogan. That will be an opportunity for our town to thank Representative Hogan personally for helping to secure an additional $150,000 for the Lower Village Traffic Safety Project that was just approved this past annual town meeting. There were some unforeseen drainage issues which caused us to plan the budget for this project tightly, and the increased state aid will keep our board, our town administrator, and our planning department from chewing our fingernails down to the nub. Second, Habitat for Humanity is submitting a comprehensive permit application to state and local authorities for to build multiple units on the parcel located at the corner of Pine Point and Sudbury Roads. Habitat for Humanity will be asking our board to submit a letter of support for this application, which we will take up along with a number of other items next meeting. Thank you. Correspondence. Anything from my colleagues? We've been asked, I think you saw this email today, that the Neshoba Regional High School Advisory Committee is asking for members to participate in that committee. Am I correct, Maureen?
Yep.
So,
Suggestions from.
Suggestions?
Anyone might think.
I think this would be right up Mr. Hawk's alley, but let's put this on,
Sure will.
and hopefully we won't have to put it on an agenda item. Okay. That brings us now to the presentation of Certificate of Recognition for Fire Chief Joseph Landry, the Executive Fire Officer Program. Chief Landry, thank you for coming and thank you for the accomplishment. Mr. Town Administrator or Mr. Ryan, do you want to talk about this at all?
Well, Chief Landry, when we actually first interviewed him, had started into the program, and it's one of the things that impressed us. In addition to being a fire captain and working for the highway department and taking care of a family, he also managed to squeeze this program in, which is a very prestigious program for the National Fire Academy. And it's hard to believe it's a couple years later and now you finally finished it, but it's something that quite impressed us at the time when we interviewed, and I'm glad to see you finally finished it off, put it to bed.
Well, in view of not only Chief Landry but his family, would you like to read and present his Certificate of Recognition?
In recognition of successful completion of the requisite courses of study and applied research projects, the National Fire Academy, under the authority granted by the 111th Congress of the United States of America and recommendation of the faculty, confers the title of Executive Fire Chief Officer upon Joseph Landry, with all honors and privileges and responsibilities thereunto appertaining. And this was awarded the 29th day of December 2016.
Right.
I wish you'd told me earlier.
Mr. Town Administrator, do you have anything to add?
I would only like to say that Chief Landry has shown professionally and personally in the short time he's been our chief, from my perspective, and I've been doing this for almost 30 years, to be as fine a professional as there is dedication and devotion to a purpose, which is what this reflects. I mean, traveling off the studies, the depth of the involvement in fire services and management of same. It's come a long way in the last 25 years, and for those that have the ambition, take the initiative and put the time in addition to their full-time job. In fact, part of this time, Chief Landry had 2 jobs in Stow and performed them all well. So for me, it's an indication of devotion, and that's what this field, the fire service, has abundance of for people, and he epitomizes that. And so I want to thank him for the effort he's put in here, and the people of Stow couldn't be served better than they're being served by this man here.
Thank you, Mr. Town Administrator. And while I realize it will be just, our recognition will be just a faint echo of everything that has been said, I will take a motion.
Actually, before I make a motion, if I could just add, I had the privilege of serving on the Fire Chief Selection Committee a few years ago, and I've hired or helped hire people in other contexts. And every time you hire someone, you kind of cross your fingers and hold your breath for a little while, kind of hope you got it right, because you never really know. But every once in a while, you know pretty quickly, oh, we got that one right. And that's what happened with Joe. I've had the privilege of serving with him in several contexts, most notably in building the station at Pompo. I find his advice and his counsel to be always very reliable, and he is a good guy to be with. And Joe, it's a privilege to have you here. And with that, I will make the motion. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Stow Board of Selectmen hereby recognize and commends Fire Chief Joe Landry on being named an Executive Fire Officer after his successful completion of the National Fire Academy program.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Chief, you want to say anything to your friends and neighbors in Stow?
Thank you very much. I do actually want to say something real quick.
Take your time.
As I mentioned before, you actually mentioned, there's a lot coming to this. And my wife, 4 years of me not being there with 4 kids in the house, and leaving for 2 weeks at a time and then doing 6 weeks of research is quite, and this is a little different from even going for my bachelor's degree, because every minute of this is something you want to do. There's very little in here. It's not taking a class that you don't have interest in, or it's 100% trying for what you really want. So first, her commitment to it helped, but also what wasn't mentioned is the town had to sign on to this also. The town actually had to get a letter from the town administrator to even be a part of this. They want to see commitment from the community because they realize it. So without the community's commitment, this doesn't happen for anybody. So I thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Chief, and
Thank you.
I'll give you a round of applause. And this applause should go not only to the chief, but his family as well.
And the fire department for supporting him while he did that, and keeping him out of trouble.
Now I understand, Chief, you have some business before us.
Yes, well, we just completed a process over the last few months for call lieutenant with the appointment of a training lieutenant. We opened up one of our call lieutenant spots, and we had one lieutenant resign, move on to bigger and better. So through a process that we vetted over the last few years, and we brought a recommendation forward to the Board of Selectmen for 2 new call lieutenants, and I'm assuming that process was acceptable by all, because we're here tonight. So Eric Benoit and Matt Olson, you could come forward. Gentlemen,
Why don't you guys have a seat right here?
I was going to say, I'm not sure how you want to do this, but
Feel at home.
feel it. You guys want to question?
Eric.
Going well so far.
Yeah, let's keep it moving.
As always in these instances, I will defer to my colleague in the first instance, at least, Mr. Ryan. Anything you'd like to say on behalf of these two candidates?
Well, I think you've all seen the documentation that was provided, and I think the chief put together a very extensive process, and I know another person who was involved in this, didn't quite make it, but he found it very, it was a good learning experience to go through it. And for these two guys to go through and put in the time and all the time and effort to go through this, I think is very impressive. And then for them to come out on top and actually get appointed with the recommendation of the chief, I think it shows, a great commitment to the fire department, as well as the fire department overall for being able to field people with these kinds of qualifications. So, congratulations, gentlemen.
Any other questions or comments from my colleagues?
Just want to say, it sounds like a very tough process you both went through. You should both be very proud of yourselves. And we thank you very much for going through it, and for your service to the town. Thank you.
It's very well documented. Congratulations. Anything you'd like to tell us or your friends and neighbors at home?
I think we're both just very excited to make.
Well said. Then I will take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, on the recommendation of Fire Chief Joe Landry, and we'll do these one at a time. On the recommendation of Fire Chief Joe Landry, I move that the board appoint Eric Benoit as a call lieutenant for the Stow Fire Department.
Second.
Any further discussion or comment? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
And Mr.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck.
Hold it.
There's
I didn't-
one more.
I didn't-
Oh, yes. Wait, one more.
Matt, you're out of luck.
You got cut off my applause.
I take it he didn't tell you this in advance, right?
On the recommendation of Fire Chief Joe Landry, I move that the board appoint Matthew Olson as a call lieutenant for the Stowe Fire Department.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Now, congratulations.
Good job.
Could it be all right under somewhat of fire department tradition, pinning the badges from somebody would that be good?
Yes.
Sure.
TV.
And maybe we can get, and
All right, hold on one second. Let's get these numbers. Oops. Okay, wait one second.
There you go, you get to stick them with a pin.
Oh.
This could be exactly what you were looking for tonight.
I'm trying to see. Yes, I am.
All right, let me see.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm trying.
All right, let me get guys.
There we go.
Nice job bringing them up there, JP.
All right, one second.
Want a picture?
thank you all for your service to the town.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's give them one more hand of applause.
That brings us to the discussion on vote on appointment of a Stow Representative to the Minuteman High School Committee. I believe you saw the well-researched explanation of why this is on our agenda. Mr. Town Administrator, do you have anything to add to this?
Nothing to add.
So it turns out that we do have to vote for the Stow Representative to the Minuteman Vocational Technical High School, and that's what's before us. If I'm not mistaken, we had only one applicant, even though it was posted, and I double-checked on that. The applicant, however, our longtime Minuteman High School Committee representative, Alice DeLuca, could not be here tonight. She's out of town on business, but I think in view of her long service to Minuteman High School and to the town of Stowe, it's probably not necessary for us to insist on her appearing.
It's always pleasant to see her, though.
It is always very pleasant to see her and her husband, who accompanies her to all of these meetings. But any questions or thoughts from my colleagues?
Not at all. I
I'd like a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint Alice DeLuca to serve as the Stow Representative to the Minuteman School Committee for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2020.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Alice probably could have that job for life if she wanted, but I'm not going to presume it.
Is this your pile or my pile?
No, that's
That was
the-
my pile.
Well, this is the correspondence file.
Oh.
That will now bring us to time to vamp.
You can go outside and play football for a while.
You can go on to other things that don't have time.
We do. Maureen, was Linda going to be up?
She is down at FinCom, but she is going to come up shortly.
What else is there to do? Well, with my colleague's assent, we could profitably advance the Eversource issue.
Because Arnie's here.
Why don't you state that loudly and clearly?
Mr. Chairman, I will recuse myself from this discussion.
Thank you, we appreciate your judgment in this matter.
I don't have the agenda, there's no time associated with that, right? Because I wouldn't
No.
want any, okay.
There is no time, although there were people who are interested. I don't know what else we could take at this point.
You could take the dreaded town administrator's report.
Can you do 45 minutes on that?
You tell me what you want. Do you want to,
Well, maybe we should ask Ingeborg to come back then.
Yeah, no, we would ask Ingeborg to come back. I'm just thinking maybe we can get some discussion on Eversource preliminary out of the way.
it's up to you.
What's on for our bare quorum that's left tonight is a discussion of the Eversource petition that has been filed with the Energy Facility Siting Board. The best thing I think I can frame this as is, right now, because of the time constraints, because of the deadline on Thursday for filing, if we do intend to file as either an intervener or as a limited participant, is that question should be the first one we address, and we don't need to really take a position until much later. I think you've seen the Conservation Commission has submitted public comments to the Energy Facility Siting Board, and I believe Planning Board is also taking this matter up tonight. They will, as I understand it, just be submitting public comments. It would be up to the board to decide if they want to file as a party in that proceeding. Having said all that, I think our representative from the Stow Energy Working Group subset that's addressed to that, Mr. Epstein, can add far more and far more intelligently than anything I can. Arnie, you were with me at the public comment sessions. Any takeaways that you had from that, those meetings?
I think, we spoke about it after the public hearings at both at Hudson and Sudbury.
Anything you want to clue in my two colleagues on?
Well, I think to your point, I think the main item for discussion tonight would be, given the Thursday deadline, would be whether the selectmen choose to participate in the decision in either a limited participant or as an intervener. If I might, the one comment that was made in a meeting with Mr. Burke and other members of the Transmission Line Working Group, as well, I think Mr. Burke heard that as well with members of the Energy Facility Siting Board, is that sometimes an intervener's status is adopted only to allow the participant to have the right of appeal in the event that the decision made by the siting board is not the one that they hoped for. So they need not be a particularly active participant during the process itself.
And I think, I don't know if, oh, I'm sorry, just let me add, and I don't know if you saw, but town council has submitted a memorandum regarding the legalities of filing and making a recommendation along those lines, but nothing with respect to the actual process or the public comment session. Arnie, I made the 2 public comment sessions in Sudbury and Hudson. I didn't make the one last night. Did you go to that one?
I did not, no, the MIPA.
The MIPA, that's about the environmental end of this. And not only will...
Could I add to that, the MIPA?
Please.
Notice was provided to us in writing today that MIPA has extended for 2 weeks the comment period before deadline, based on comments that I presume would have been made last night, persuaded them to extend it 2 more weeks. The comment period.
And if I might, one thing that was just brought to my attention as well yesterday is the original initial filing by Eversource to MIPA, I think it's called an ENF, had some incorrect information in it, and there was a revised submission as of last week, I understand, which I did have a opportunity to take a look at last night and today. The net of that is that the impact on, I think, the designation as other wetlands areas is much smaller than was shown in the original filing.
What I got out of that too, at least if I understood it correctly, was that some of the affected areas, they actually overlapped, so that where they were clear cutting, there was like 13,000 square feet or something of clear cutting and 13,000 or 12,000 square feet of fill, but they were both actually the same piece of area, so that the net was 12 or 13,000 disturbed square feet versus a sum of the two. So.
But yeah, I understood that as well, that it was, the responses to the original filing were somewhat confusing, so that you could interpret it as the sum of the two, and when in fact it was really the larger of the two, which was the affected area.
Any thoughts from my colleagues?
Can I ask a question and then make a statement or a comment?
Anything you'd like, Mrs. L.
Arnie, do I take it that you're expressing a mild preference for intervention, or am I reading too much in there? Because I respect your opinion. I'd like to hear a preference if you're willing to give one.
Well, I think that my opinion would be, insofar as this matter goes, that the selectmen have already stated their preference that there should be no overhead transmission line as part of this project. If the selectmen wanted to have the ability to participate in an appeal, were the EFSB to decide in favor of what is now not the preferred route, but a noticed alternative, which is the overhead transmission line. As I understand it, the only means available to them would be to participate as an intervener. I don't know if I made myself clear.
Yeah, you're saying if we wanted to preserve the right to appeal, we'd have to intervene. Right. Mr. Chairman, I haven't been as involved in it as you have, so here's my kind of cutting to the chase. We expressed a preference, namely that they not go for the overhead. They didn't. They expressed that their preference is the underground. As I read what the Conservation Commission has written and my understanding of what the Planning Board believes, and for anyone who doesn't know, I'm married to the Conservation Coordinator, but I respect her opinion for reasons beyond the fact that I have to.
But that's sufficient.
Yeah, even if I didn't have to, I would, is what I'm saying. is that they're saying, and I can't get into the technicalities of it, the clearing, the combination of mechanical and herbicides is reasonable as far as they can tell right now. That's what I'm getting from it. Considering all the litigation we've been in, frankly, I was thinking that limited participant might do it. I see town council's recommendation that we intervene because of these zoning things, which are separate but related. I get what Mr. Epstein is saying, the chair is kind of saying too, I think. You preserve your rights to appeal. And being a basically suspicious individual, I know that things can go sideways when you don't expect it. So I see the value in intervention, but I guess I want to emphasize something here. I really would expect that if we intervene, that we instruct town council to cool it, to do the bare minimum, let our working group, which has a lot of expertise in it, monitor it, and alert us if something goes off the rails. We have to gear up and go in a different direction.
Thank you, Mr. Selby. Mr. Riep?
Until I had seen by the way, the information you put together, Brian, as far as
Very helpful.
what the limited intervention and an intervener really meant, it was very helpful.
I agree.
As well as the information that we can essentially do as little or as much as we want. While we have very little that is involved in the project because it's of such a limited nature, I tend to agree that going the intervention route is probably the wise move. It's been recommended by town council, and I don't want to end up getting into spending tens of thousands of dollars for something that we don't need to, and that is going to have limited impact on us. But
Please, sir, one second. I don't want anyone to miss what you're saying.
Do that? Oh, yeah, good. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Sorry about that.
That's
No
all right.
problem. Please
Well,
continue, Mr. Riep.
I'm of the same opinion as Jim that what we should probably do is monitor it, and if we do see something go sideways, then we can get involved. But other than that, let it run its course. Some of it, I started thinking about it, is, yeah, we do have the preferred option that that we've supported. However, they may or may not accept that, and we may also have actually more of an impact if they decide to start going down State Road or Hudson Road. And that may actually have more of an effect on us than anything else. So we may want to reserve our rights,
Right.
should that option pop up or come back.
I was thinking the same thing.
So, I'm leaning towards, and I'd be supportive of taking the intervener route with the thought process of keeping it to, monitor versus actively intervene at this point.
Thank you both very much for your thoughts. Let me just add a couple of things. First off, that handout I put together was actually it was prompted by a phone call I got from the presiding officer from the Energy Facilities Lighting Board. I had gone to the first public comment session in Sudbury, and I had a couple of questions that I knew you both would have. And I left my card, and the presiding officer actually called me, and he was very informative, very helpful. And I think he, this may just be my impression, but I think he'd like community involvement at the intervener level from all three towns. As you know, as a liaison to Sudbury and Hudson, I can tell you that they're very committed to the idea of the option being along existing energy corridors under Route 20. I know that our town may have a different position. I think, as both my colleagues, Mr. Ryan and Mr. Salvi, pointed out, in order to preserve those positions, if they are different from our neighboring communities, and that would be a shame, but I understand. We're here to represent Stow, not Hudson and Sudbury. But if we do have a different position, perhaps we need to be at the table. And the only way we can be at the table is if we file a petition. I've had discussions with our town council, with permission from our town administrator, and originally I was going to draft the petition to intervene, but she got started, but it's, I think it'll be very reasonably priced, and that's all we're going to do. I think the town administrator will agree with me. We've told the town council to stand down after we file a petition to intervene and just let the process work its course and see where it goes. I might end up going to some of the hearings. I won't say anything without checking with anyone first, but I might go to some of those. I think that would be interesting.
Well, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I do want, although I want them to do nothing, I do want to be represented by town council. The more I read about this, I read your materials and I glanced at the things in the EFSB handbook. I mean, it is a legal proceeding, and the whole, well, one of the rationales for intervention is things may go sideways. And if things go sideways, then potentially we have to exercise the whole menu of options there: discovery, depositions, asking questions at evidentiary hearings. I want them to be involved from the beginning. I want them to be our representative, but now, while our working group and our Concom and Planning Board seem to think that it's in the zone of reasonableness, I don't want to add to our legal bills.
I agree 100%, and town administrator, I hope, will agree with me that we've told town council that we want to stand down after the filing of the petition. It's just that we got to get that thing in by Thursday. That's the tricky part. And then, as the presiding officer told me, and as the staff of the EFS told me, lots of people intervene to preserve their rights to appeal, and they let all the other groups that are parties to the process bring the matter forward. And I don't think that's a bad strategy at this point.
Well, Mr. Chairman, at the risk of leaving you with 25 minutes of dead air, do you want a motion?
I would, I was just about to say, I prefer to hold a motion after the public, just in case somebody comes in on this one issue. I think we saw that. But I think we've got a consensus of the voting members of the board at this point. Is there anyone here on the Eversource project? No? All right.
Can I make a comment, Brian?
Of course.
I think that we should just vote it now, because I suspect that anybody that was coming would be, they wouldn't be telling us to take no action, shall we say. I would think that they would be coming to encourage us to take the vote that we're going to be taking, which is to seek intervener status.
You're probably right, but number one, they could very well come after 8 p.m. Looking at the agenda, they see something ahead of it at 8 p.m. And they, at the very least, might want to push back on some of the comments that I know I made, that, you know, it seems to be within the, from what our professional staff can tell, it's in the zone of reasonableness. They might want to say, no, it doesn't seem to be. And I kind of agree with the chair. We ought to give, before we tie it up with a bow, we ought to give them a chance to say that.
We won't be repeating the performance.
No, Mr. Town Administrator, I assure you. In fact, the thing that I tend to agree with Mr. Salvi, Mr. Ryan, only because I saw an email going around from people who said that they wanted to be here. They're probably before the planning board right now, making their pitch there. And I will not repeat, I will not ask my colleagues to repeat themselves. I sure as heck am not going to repeat myself, but I would like to give people of this town their 2 cents worth.
Okay. I'm always happy to do that.
Although it would be nice, because I think we're going to have to take a recess, unfortunately. And let me explain to those in attendance who are here for the public hearing. We originally scheduled this at 8 o'clock because we expected our state legislators to be here tonight. They backed out late last week. And once you set an agenda, once you hold or give notice of a public hearing, you can't change the time. So there may be a little recess between now and 8 o'clock, but that's unavoidable. Now, would we please have our colleague, Ms. Ingeborg Clark, back in? Thank you. But there are a couple of matters we can do.
I would say that as the town clerk's here, she may not want to hang around.
Oh, I'm gonna hang around to the bitter end.
But we could probably, we don't necessarily have to vote on it, but if, I know the town clerk has suggested that if we have the town election,
Is that okay with you?
go forward, she'd like to have different
Can we go to
hours.
this?
Is
Sure.
that okay with you, Mrs. Selly?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is obviously contingent on us
Yes.
voting.
But you can think about it in the
Right.
next 20,
Right.
10 minutes.
Do you mind taking the town clerk right now?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. Just for those in attendance, and again, I said this many times at our last meeting, and I was chastised for it, we're not prejudging anything, okay? We're going to have the public hearing. But because of the timeline when an option of comes up for the right of first refusal, we have to put so many ducks in a row so quickly that we have to take steps just to make sure that if we need a town meeting, we can have a town meeting. And then also to have a vote after that town meeting. So we've been discussing a number of things, including a draft warrant, and now the town clerk will be before us suggesting the hours for voting, which I believe would be July 20th, am I correct?
Correct.
That's again, only if this board decides to advance the matter to the town meeting at the conclusion of the public hearing. All your voices will be heard, we haven't made any decision, we're just taking steps in the event we do go to a town meeting. But having said that, and probably having said that kind of thing too much already, Madam Town Clerk, would you like to tell us what you've got in mind?
Sure. Of course, this came after your last meeting when we talked about opening the warrant and having the ballot in the election. And Debbie, my assistant, and I went back and we started thinking about that. I would expect that this town meeting will have a lower turnout than most annuals. We just had an annual that had a town meeting with 366 people and an election with 806. And this is a summer town meeting. I think a lot of people will be away, and I don't. So I started to think about what happened last year in September with the Minuteman election, special election, when we were talking about a multi-million-dollar school. And they ran that election from noon till 8 p.m. And we had 607 voters in those 8 hours. And we just finished an annual which had 2 contested races and a ballot question on it. And we ran it for 13 hours and we had 806. And so in an event to, actually I'm sorry, 862. In an event to save a little money, to save a little wear and tear on my election workers, because I expect it to be very slow over that course of time, I'm proposing that you consider for the first time that I have come to your board of reducing the hours from noon to 8 p.m. And the savings in the sense of the number of workers in the police detail in that 5 hours is just around $750, 720, 750, depending on the detail officer and what rate they're charged. So it's a small cost savings. I'm expecting, I think, based on my feeling right now, that we'll probably have maybe 400, 450 people at that election. That's just a guess at this time. I might know more as absentee ballots are requested, but looking back at past elections, and I'll give you a little worksheet here. In special town meeting in March of 2015, we had 579 people over a course of 13 hours.
I believe you.
Yeah, yeah. And Maureen, here's something. So the numbers are small. I mean, if you decide that you want to stay at 13, that's fine, we'll do it. I'm just looking at changing it up a little bit. Also, if we did go to shorter polling hours, we would do a, intense publication about anybody missing those morning hours to do absentee ballots. Because if you have left town and have gone to work outside of the polling hours, you can get an absentee ballot. So, just something I thought you might consider. I don't know what your thoughts are.
And it's a Thursday too, right?
It's a Thursday,
Yeah.
so we're already off from a regular Tuesday. And the reason I do have it separated out by those 10 days is so that we have the same voter registration deadline.
Yeah.
Any thoughts or questions from my colleagues?
I've got one question.
Sure.
Hypothetically, let's say we have the town meeting and the only thing that's going to be on the election right now is the borrowing for affordable housing.
Correct.
If that goes down at the town meeting,
Election goes on anyway. Because the ballots, you've called the election. I have the ballot question 35 days prior, and we will have sent out absentee ballots 21 days prior. The election doesn't get canceled. It's going to still continue, so we will still be doing it no matter what.
It just has no effect no matter what.
Well,
Right.
in fact, though, it does.
It could.
Because you can go back to a town meeting
Yeah.
after.
Oh, right.
Correct.
That's
If
happened.
it-
You
if-
wouldn't
Sort of
wanna-
happened, we canceled
Right.
in the winter.
Right, right.
well, the thing is that
The 120 days might have expired.
the
by then.
120 days would have
One at a
expired
time.
at that
One at a
point.
time.
Yeah.
One at a time. I can listen, talk, and think. I can do 2 out of those 3. I can't do.
I understand.
I can only do 2 out of those 3.
Just
Sure.
like-
Anything else? Ms. Clark?
I guess my only question is, looking at these numbers that you sent us, it looks like the 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock time frame is fairly busy, then you have hiatus.
You know why? Absentee ballots get processed in that first hour.
Oh.
Because
Okay.
we're waiting for stuff to do. So we
Okay.
process in that first group is typically our absentee ballot time. I mean, we can fit them in at any time. In a state election, we're doing them all day. But since it's pretty slow,
So you find that most people come in the evenings?
yep,
Okay.
yes,
Well, thank you for that.
yes.
Mr. Town Administrator, I'm sorry. Ms. Selby, do you have something else, Slide?
Yeah, I'm just mildly surprised, Linda, that there's no statute that governs how many hours you have
It
to
does.
have. Oh, okay. And I'm really surprised that there's no statute somewhere that says elections must be on Tuesday,
No,
because they're always on Tuesday.
no. I did have the statute.
That's all right.
It's a Mass General Law, Chapter
You did mention,
54, I just had it right here, 54, Section 64. And it says, in towns, at the election of officers, polls may be opened as early as 15 minutes before 6 o'clock in the forenoon and shall be opened as early as 12 o'clock noon and kept open at least 4 hours and until the time specified in the warrant. And then, and then when you're, for the purpose of a voting question to be submitted to the voters of said town shall be the same hours designated by selectmen for the election of town officers, but we're not, this is a special election, so we could just do 4 hours instead of 8 hours. but-
Okay, so it sets, for a special election like this, it sets really the minimum over 4 hours.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, great, thank you.
sure.
Do you want some more time on that? Researching that?
No, I'm all right.
Because I did see that, I didn't see
I
my
didn't
statute,
cite
but
it.
I saw you, but I saw that you had said you researched it. Mr. Town Administrator, do you have any thoughts on it? Then I will turn it open to the public who is here on this issue for the public hearing. We're not starting the public hearing. The only question that I'll take comments on is whether or not we should shorten the election hours as the town clerk has recommended. And just please state your name and address when you
Carol Hale, 111 Old Bolton Road. I just wanted a clarification. I was confused when you said if you don't recommend it, it's not voted for in the town meeting, you still have to have the election, and that still can then have an impact?
No.
Can you clarify that again? I didn't understand.
The statute allows, this is a contingency vote, and under the statute, you must have an affirmative 2/3 vote at town meeting and the simple majority at the local ballot with regard to debt exclusion, which is the nature of our borrowing here. What the statute allows is that within 120 days of the election, you can hold you could hold your first town meeting. We typically go with the town meeting first if it doesn't get 2/3. But you have 120 days within the time that you've held the election. And I've seen many communities come back on matters that are terribly important to them, like schools particularly, and go back with another town meeting to try to get to 2/3 now that it's got the simple majority. So you would want to hold the election for that reason, as well as the pro forma requirements.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, ma'am?
It does, thank you.
Any other questions just on shortening the election hours? All right, then, unless I hear any questions or comments from my colleagues, I'm willing to take a motion.
Trying to find, Mr. Chairman, on the recommendation of the town clerk, I move to designate polling hours for the special July 20th election to be from 12 p.m. noon to 8 p.m.
Second. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Good luck. We're interested in seeing this experiment.
I think it will work out very well.
And what also seems to be working out very well is our use of the time, because,
And I said 10 minutes.
and now we have a time to hear from our town administrator.
With respect to the report, or some other
Please.
matters?
If you, unless you have other matters you'd like to...
Well, no, the only reason I raise it is that, leave aside the 61A matters, I've recommended in my activities report that we go forward with a special town meeting for two reasons. One is, as I detailed in my activities report, and we discussed at, I think it was our last meeting, the Mass DOT, the dams safety report that we received and the deficiencies therein and the short schedule we've got to attempt to remedy and to put in place a process over 2 phases to correct that damage. So the monies estimated for the engineering services are in this special town meeting warrant, and right now they're pegged at $35,000. The other thing is, we've got a completely failed septic system over at the library, and as on my activities report mentioned, they basically got a direct eyes-on after going in with a backhoe today, finally. So the preliminary estimate was the failure. Both D-boxes into the leach field not functioning, and that was just looking through the openings when they, to the top of the D-box. But now that they've gone in there and revealed it all, it's a system failure. Replacing 2 systems with 1 would be the proposal, and 2 estimates came in today from 2 local contractors, which I didn't have, so I was pegging that at 35. It would be 50. One was low 40s, the other was 50, and we've got some engineering that goes with that for the system. So for those 2 reasons, I would be recommending a special town meeting in any event, because we don't otherwise have monies available for those 2. and then the 2 planning department, which I also recommend, and we've talked about for many months.
So why don't you tell the people at home about this, because this is very important for our traffic safety initiatives.
So the town administrator has a working group that we organized last fall for the express purpose of looking at traffic issues townwide to complement what is the ongoing traffic analysis and engineering review under the complete streets. And at town meeting, there was $50,000 appropriated, so there is a firm, and also my activities report, I reviewed the request from the planning department to hire a firm to carry on with the complete streets engineering now, and that's to create a prioritization plan. In other words, go through the town and under the complete streets criteria established by Mass DOT, which is increasing access to our roads for pedestrians, bicyclists, ADA requirements. That's the purpose of complete streets. So they'll do a townwide survey, and they'll receive emphasis from the town as to streets that we feel should be given attention at this point under the analysis and assessment phase, not where the priority list will come out. And then they'll filter down to the other ones. So part of their work, I think, can be complemented with the work that we're talking about here with regard to perhaps creating safety zones. The Municipal Modernization Act of November 2016 created what's called local acceptance statutes, which would authorize those towns that actually accepted the provisions, and that's what's in the special town meeting. It's 2 articles to accept the statute, and then the accompanying request to amend our bylaws. So both in the safety zone and the other area where Mass DOT is going to allow local acceptance and authority is in thickly settled areas. So currently under state statute, 30 miles per hour is the limit in thickly settled. That would allow the town, and specifically the Board of Selectmen, if petitioned, to decide in and of yourselves by a vote whether to enact either one or both of these provisions, meaning within thickly settled areas to reduce the speed limit in those areas of town where you felt you were persuaded by the planning department and our working group and others that are involved in traffic planning, and what might come out of this complete streets planning to begin with, have an engineer to do it, which we'll be asking them to include in their consideration the new statutes that allow that. But in order to do that, we've got to start the process of getting the legislative body locally to approve the local acceptance of both of those, then get our bylaws changed in 2 areas for that purpose, and then you'll have the authority as a board to enact those. And so I think the sooner we get started with that, given the heightened attention that we've had, and it's growing by neighborhoods, of looking at traffic and what we can do about it.
We are responding to initiatives and concerns from neighborhoods about traffic speeds in their areas, and I think this is a great idea. I don't want to prejudge the issue, but I think this would be because we're going to have to take action on this. Next week, we have to, because it involves a zoning bylaw change, we have to have a public hearing, just like we're going to have in a few minutes, and it'll be solely for these traffic zoning bylaw changes in conformity or consonance with the Massachusetts Municipal Modernization Act. So I think that's a great idea. Any questions or comments from my colleagues on the town administrator's report, or at least that aspect of it?
No, I think we're lucky we're having this meeting when we're having it.
Well, we're not prejudging that.
True. Well,
No, the time, I think the timing.
yeah.
But the timing is serendipitous. Anything else you'd like to report on, Mr. Town Administrator?
I would want to inform the board that, in the public, that I executed today a public safety agreement with the Collins Foundation for their upcoming Wings and Wheels event that they hold annually. It is the standard contract that we developed, 2 years ago at the behest of the board. And so that's now in place. And the event is this weekend, so it was timely. So I wanted to convey that to you. I also, in addition to the engineering contract that I've recently approved for the planning department on complete streets and by the way, the value of that contract is $35,000 for the complete streets engineering, traffic engineering. The budget approved was $50,000 at the annual town meeting in May. So we've got a cushion there for that. So in the event, as I hope is the case, that beyond the complete streets, part of the work, the assignments of my working group was to look at other traffic-related choke points in town, i.e. in the fall, apple picking season, especially in the southeast quadrant of town, where also the Collings Foundation has an event, and what to do about it. Gleasondale Bridge, the consequences are going to be around for several years until that bridge is reconstructed. So not at all related to complete streets, but still, you got a traffic engineering company coming in. My feeling is we should take advantage of it at the same time to see what we can get done in some of those other areas of town where traffic of a different nature is an issue. So in addition to that, I'm reviewing the library building restoration committee. I don't know if is that the name you've given yourselves, or do you?
I hear people use different names.
Okay.
They call it the Randall Library Restoration Committee.
That group. There's an additional services contract that I'm negotiating now with the current consultant who was hired to go through the basically early schematic design up to the point, but short of producing construction documents. And so moving forward for additional services, construction documents, production and construction, bidding services, and construction administration are the three areas of additional service that need to be done if this project is going to move forward. As you recall, the annual town meeting appropriated $380,000 for the purpose of completing that aspect of the design phase and the actual construction for the restoration. So
Out of CPA funds.
out of CPA funds. And so that's where the money's coming from, and I just sent back what I hope is the last iteration on that negotiation, some clarity that I was looking for. And so would go ahead and get that executed unless the board objected, so that the library building committee could carry on.
Any comments, questions, or objections from my colleagues? Thank you, Mr. Town Administrator, for paying attention to all these details and looking so proactively on traffic. Thank you. Well, that brings us to right about 8 o'clock, doesn't it?
Do we want to put these chairs along the?
Yes, why don't we make, thank you very much, Mr. Salvi. There's plenty of room if you want to come in. If we get really crowded, we can always cross the street, although I'm hopeful that we can pack people in.
Good thing the fire chief isn't still here.
Is there anybody left in the hall? No? All right, thank you all, and there are still a couple of seats here if anybody wants to move over there. But I will now open the hearing by reading the previously published notice of public hearing. On Tuesday, June 13th, 2017, at 8 p.m. at the Stow Town Building, the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing to consider exercising its right of first refusal for property classified under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 61A, shown on Assessor's Maps R-3-48 and R-3-48A, and located at 49 Old Bolton Road. A copy of the notice of intent to sell is on file at the Selectmen's office, and this was posted and advertised. Now, having opened the hearing, let me explain how we're going to conduct this hearing. I realize that this is a matter of vital interest, not only to those who support affordable housing, but those who live in the neighborhood of Old Bolton Road. Everyone is going to get a chance to be heard tonight. This is a public hearing to get input from the community about whether or not this board should exercise its right of first refusal, and if we do, then to pass it on to your fellow community members at town meeting, which would be held on July 10th. What we're going to just go over briefly, and I was given public hearing procedures, probably to make sure that given my first public hearing, I didn't go off the rails. But what we will start with is the principal speakers will identify themselves to the chair prior to the start of the hearing, and that would be the principal hearings on behalf of the proponents, and then principal speakers on behalf, if you have any, of the opposition. Then we are going to hear the proponent's case for the board exercising its right of first refusal on this property. Then we will entertain questions from the Board of Selectmen, and then questions from you, the public. Then opponents will have a chance to state their opposition, either individually or as a group. As a group is better. Then there will be questions by the Board of Selectmen to the opponents, if any, and then questions from the public. Then there's time here for a recess. I don't know if we'll do that, if we're moving along briskly, and then concluding statement and rebuttal, and from the proponent, and then concluding statement, rebuttal from the opponent. Here's the thing. In terms of the presentations, please hold your questions till the end. We will take questions. We will take comment. But you have to wait. And if you do ask questions, just like if you do offer comment, you must state your name and address. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to insist on you stating your name and address each time you ask a question, each time you give a comment, just so that we make sure that we have a complete record. Technically, any questions that you ask are or should be addressed to me, for me, the chair, to ask. I'm not going to stand on that because that sounds kind of stilted. I'll assume that you're going to ask good questions in good faith. If I have a problem with the question, I'll stop you, but I'm going to allow the public here and the proponents to ask their questions to the other side directly, just so long as it doesn't get out of hand. At the completion of the entire presentation that I've just outlined, the board will deliberate in open session as to whether or not we should exercise our right of first refusal based upon what we've heard tonight. And if so, then we will adopt the warrants and the warrant agenda items that have been presented, and then at that case we will move forward to a town meeting on July 10th. If we do not exercise our right of first refusal tonight, then we, as you heard, will still have a town meeting. This matter just won't be on at town meeting. Is there anything that I've forgotten, Mr. Town Administrator?
No.
I've probably gone on too long, haven't I? All right, then. As I said, we'll first hear from the proponents for the board to exercise its right of first refusal on these parcels on Old Bolton Road. Could you please identify yourself?
Leonardo Array Architects. I'm the housing consultant for SMAC.
And that's the Stow Municipal Affordable Housing Trust?
Correct.
And why don't you identify yourself?
Mike Kuczynski, 12 Canterbury Road. I'm the chair of the Stow Municipal Affordable Housing Trust.
Thank you, gentlemen. Would you care to start your presentation?
Sure. Mike, would you like to say something before I start, or should I just run with it?
If you don't mind my chiming in as you start. Go ahead. I mean, you can start.
Sure. So, I understand everybody's aware of the transaction, the proposed transaction here of the chapter land. I'm going to start just by describing in general terms the neighborhood, which you probably know better than I. The parcels in question today are Lot C and Lot A, which are located between Gray Road and Old Bolton Road. Across the street from Old Bolton Road, we have Bose, we have the community park, and there's a fair amount of farmland, open space, or unoccupied land. Village Stow is to the east of the parcel, further east to the parcels, and Arbor Glen is further southeast, just as a reference. Other than that, there's a series of single-family homes around that area. Like I say, across from Old Bolton Road, what we see is the community park. We see the open space in front of Bose. There's no other structures in that area. On the side of Gray Road, there's, however, some single-family home fairly close to the road, and in addition being a busier road than Old Bolton Road. Taking a closer look at it, the two parcels that are being offered are C and A, C to the left and A to the right, 1.5 acres each. The parcel in the middle is where I understand the homeowner, the owner of the properties live. So some of the opportunities that SMATH, the Housing Trust, has been looking at this in having access to this parcel will be certainly an opportunity for the trust to implement its mission to support the creation and preservation of affordable housing for low and moderate income households in Stow. By returning the chapter lands to tax roll is another opportunity, whether it's affordable housing, mixed income housing, or even market rate housing, depending on the funds used to purchase this land. By developing housing on this parcel, this will support the housing production plan by creating maybe 8 units of affordable housing units. Those will be accounted on the subsidized housing inventory. Just to have a reference in terms of the housing production plan, the annual target to certify the housing production plan in Stow will be 13 units. So if you can produce 8, that started to get you close to your, let's say, annual obligation of producing affordable housing. Certainly, by exploring the opportunity of developing housing on this parcel, by the control of local agency, might be an opportunity to create some guidelines of the type of residential development that you may want to see on this area. Going back to the two parcels, this is one scenario. This is just an exercise for site capacity to have a sense of the scale of what could be developed here. We using, just for discussion purposes, developing 4 2-bedroom units on each lot. So that will be a total of 8 units on the 2 lots total. So that's the scenario that we're going to be discussing today. And there's nothing programmatic that holds us to that mix of unit and number of bedrooms, except that we believe that in each one of the parcels you can only have up to 9 bedrooms, given Title V regulation, and maybe it's between 6 and 9 bedrooms. So we pick 8 bedrooms, so a combination of 4 2-bedrooms that works. So if you look at Lot C, that is 2 duplexes. One duplex will be a two levels unit. The other one will be 1 level unit with a 2-level unit attached to it. So this, in this scenario, is including an accessible unit, just to create a wider range of housing opportunities. Parking will be on the front. Access will be on Old Bolton Road. So the parking surface will be pretty much across the street, an existing surface parking lot. What you see on the green dots are pretty much representing the existing vegetation. Nothing is sagged, just to represent that a lot of the vegetation can be preserved. The buildings will be set back probably close to 100 feet, the way that I'm shown there. Everything is within the 30-feet setback as permitted by zoning. There is also a retaining wall along Old Bolton Road.
Stonewall.
Stonewall, not retaining wall. That will need to be cut out to allow for the driveway, but other than that, most of it could be preserved. Just as general terms, that's more or less the scale that we're talking about. A duplex on the right is a two-level structure. The duplex on the left is a two-level with a lower building, similar to some of the farms with different volumes. And the one-level unit will be the accessible unit. The stone wall can be preserved. There's probably more vegetation that can be preserved than what is shown on the illustration. In Lot A, the lot to the right, access also will be from the Old Bolton Road. And this time, even though this came from Lot C, probably can fit here with some tweaking, we're showing something a little bit different. We decided to have the one-level accessible unit by itself, like a single-family unit, and then have 3 two-level townhomes in one building. So there's still 2 structures, one small and one a little bit larger than the other, surface parking to the front, and a lot of open space to be preserved for the members of the development. All the setbacks in accordance to the zoning requirements, and the first building is probably around 70 feet from Bolton Road. So these developments require a lot of funding because there is a gap between what is the affordable pricing. That means people that earns up to 80% of the area median income, which for a family of 4 is around $70,000. So there is a gap between what it costs to develop, to construct those units, and what people can actually afford without expending a lot of money from their income before they fall into what is called housing burn, cost burn. So if we add up the different parts to develop this property within this scenario of 8 units development, the site acquisition we already know that is presented as $410,000. We calculated about $1,900,000 for residential construction, that is meaning the construction of the building itself, all 8 units, site work, septic, well, all the infrastructure that is needed. Soft cost is around $325 something thousand dollars. These numbers are based in different developments, 3 unit, 50 unit. Those are the numbers that we're getting for soft costs. So the total development cost will be $2,660,000. Now, a 2-bedroom unit at an affordable price will sell for $180,000. So that will be your only revenue for the project. So the total revenue by the sale of the homes will be $1,440,000. So there's still a gap just over $1 million, which translates to about $150,000 subsidy per unit, which is a lot of money. But if you want to put it in comparison to other programs, what other communities are doing, for instance, with the Housing Opportunity Purchase Program, or what they call in some other places the Preservation Home Program, which essentially consists in providing a grant to qualify low-income households to purchase an existing home. And those fundings are between $125,000 and $190,000. So the gap funding that we identifying here is fairly similar to what happened in other communities, but this time you will be doing new construction, which probably is more cost-effective use of funds. So In terms of the funding, I think immediately we will be talking about the $410,000 to acquire the property. All the other fundings are yet to be determined, whether there are CPA or some other source of funding that a developer may have access to in the sale of the units. So in general, what we're looking at, just to, as a reference, the image on the left is the village of Stow. It's a nicely well-done development with another level of density that we're talking about here. We're not talking about that level of density. We're certainly not talking about a single-family home on each parcel, but probably a duplex or something of a much smaller scale than you see at the village of Stow. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I just want to thank you very much. I know that given the 120-day deadline,
Yeah.
this is a very good and fair picture of what you're thinking of doing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for getting it to us. Is it possible to see this up on a Stow website?
Correct.
It's going to be on,
We'll get to Maureen.
to put on, or, so it will be available for everyone. And I will take you, Mike, but just a second. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's here tonight for standing. I'm sorry that we're so crowded. If it makes sense, if you can open those windows, feel free to do so.
We have the AC on though?
Do we have the AC?
We've overmatched the AC, I think, with this many people.
It is, it's not sufficient, so. It won't hurt that system.
Thank you all for packing yourselves in here. It makes a lot more sense than journeying and then going across the street, where it's probably even harder. Thank you for your patience, Mike.
Sure.
Please continue.
No, thank you for the opportunity to talk. So I just wanted to put a little bit of context in this. First of all, for the expenses, I had a long conversation with the Mass Housing Partnership today. The average subsidy per unit is not something that is published, but it is around $150,000 per unit. But that includes also very large projects where these soft costs are spread over a lot more units. So their impression was at $152,000. We were it was a very good number for a small infill, which is what this is called. We're putting it in a small parcel, small infill development. $152,000 is per unit is a quite an economical number. Now, we from past experience, we had, in the past, we would say, well, we could build 2 units there, we could build 6 units. We decided to kind of put a stake in the ground so that everybody could picture what we were proposing here. So we were proposing 8 units total with 4 on each. And it's important to remember that the secret to affordable housing being affordable to build is density. So we proposed this because with this many units, we could get down to kind of an average kind of subsidy per unit. However, if the town were to purchase these parcels, there would be a process that would take place over the next months or year or whatever to look at and have input from the community about what is the right balance between the number of units and the cost per unit. So if the town and the townsfolk and the citizens here decided that they're not comfortable with that level of density, it could be fewer units, but they would each cost more. There wouldn't be there were certain of those costs that would not be that are not per unit costs, that like site preparation, those kinds of things. They're pretty much the same whether you're going to build a couple units or more. That's one thing. The second thing is that the purchase and sale is for both units. That does not, pardon? Parcels, pardon me. Thank you. And we have to respond to the purchase and sale that's been provided. However, the town, if the town were to purchase these, we would not have to develop both parcels. We could sell one, resell one on the open market for market cost, whatever the town could get for it, and develop the other one. So we are not necessarily, we have to buy both units, but we're not necessarily committed to developing both of them. That would be kind of a middle ground where that could be another scenario, but I think it's important to remember that. We have to buy them both, but we don't have to develop them. If at some point in the future, the reason we're suggesting also is that we is that we borrow the money rather than using CPC funds straight up front, would be that there would be fewer constraints. So if the town decided after the purchase that we're just not comfortable with this level of density, we're not comfortable with this with the projects that are proposed here, they could be resold on the open market, and there would be no constraints in that. If we were to use CPC funds to buy these parcels for affordable housing, when we resold them, we would have to resell them for affordable housing, and if we can't build it, no one's going to be able to build them there. So it would very severely restrict the market price that we could get back for it. So I think that's everything. Oh, sorry.
One more clarification. This exercise doesn't include any engineering whatsoever. We haven't done any pre-engineering. We don't know exactly what could be on the site. We don't know if it perks or not. We're going to work on that. This is just to illustrate the level of capacity. There's no program. We haven't selected anything specific.
We're scheduled a week.
Right.
The soonest date Neshoba Board of Health would give us is a week from today for that, so we would have that data before a town meeting. But we could not get we don't have control over when Neshoba sets a date.
I've said several times, not only in connection with this project, but other projects, we appreciate your willingness and your diligence in trying to get a conceptual plan in front of the town, and that you're going to continue to work on some of these other questions right up until town meeting.
And beyond, maybe.
Well, but for our purposes
Right.
right now, it'll be town meeting, and we appreciate that you are trying to gather all the information that your fellow town residents will need. This is an imperfect process, but given the 120-day deadline, this is the process that we've got.
And this is even shorter because there were some issues with notice, so we had closer to 90 days, I think, in this particular instance. So
All right,
we had a really even tighter schedule than usual.
I give you 2 pats on the back.
Thank you.
But no, but this is this is what we have to work with. All right, the first thing I will do is open this up to questions from my colleagues on the board for the presenters. Mr. Ryan.
I know we kind of had this conversation before, but if we end up putting affordable housing on this property, my expectation, shall we say, would be that all of the money come from CPC. Therefore, are you planning on talking to CPC and getting their commitment that they would fund this project if town meeting voted to buy it for you and you figured out you can do it? Because we've got money in the CPC. I am really not willing to, or I'm not in favor of, I'll say, spending additional tax dollars and then borrowing the money when we have CPC funding available. All right? Now,
Can I just clarify that question? Are you saying for purchase or for development?
either.
So just, we can use CPC funds in the future when there's a specific project. We could request CPC funds at that time.
Mm-hmm.
However, we can't use CPC funds to reimburse the purchase cost. So we can include the purchase cost in the total development cost, and there may be ways to use, for instance, some of the money that doesn't come from CPC, but would come from the actual purchase of the units, something to go back to defray the costs of the land, but we can't specifically use CPC funds in retrospect. If it's either you use it to buy the land or you don't, and you can't go back and say, well, we bought this land, now we want to throw some CPC funds. That we won't be able to do. But we could fund all the development costs, for instance, out of CPC funds, and then use some of the monies that's recouped to repay the original $410,000 for the acquisition.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Ryan?
Not really, because my understanding, at least, was when Laura Spear was here, was that was doable.
We know more now than we did then.
Okay, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because
And that's-
I just want to make sure I
Absolutely.
understand,
So
fully understand.
So CPC funds have a lot of strings on them, and one of the strings being that we can't retrospectively buy the land, say, well, can we switch it from this pocket to this pocket? Once we buy it, we can't use the CPC funds to But again, if you look at $2.6 million in construction costs, $410,000 is a considerable amount of money, but it's a small piece of the total. So,
And are there any other funding sources that SMART is exploring in addition to CPC or CPA funds?
there's really, neither at the state nor federal level, this type of development, infill development, small projects, there's really no money for this. There might be a couple of dozen thousand of dollars that might be available for pre-development costs or for other things, and we'll explore those, but there's not a significant funding source except for essentially community preservation funds.
And if I may, a developer might be able to identify at the time of the development, identify other funding opportunities. Sometime it could be the Federal Home Loan Bank, but other than that, like Mike says, it's very difficult to find state funding for small development.
Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues on the board? Oh, sure, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You know, that's it, where I'm appreciating the, getting some of the new information here. I probably I have some serious heartburn about using non-CPC money to be buying pieces of property that we then may not want to use. And when we discussed it last time, I wasn't willing to try to stand in the way of it at the time, because it seemed like you had a plan, maybe trying to acquire some of the other property, selling off one of these lots and playing dominoes, and I understand the whole logic of that, and it makes perfect sense. But without the ability to go back and buy it with CPC money, I think I got a little bit of it as far as maybe using some of the proceeds to be able to pay it down. But I'm concerned that we're going to end up buying a piece of property, and then we're going to turn around, have had a town meeting, a town election, all cost us money, and we're going to be out 30 grand, and we won't have gotten any further forward.
Well, my understanding is that we're having a town meeting anyway.
And I just found that out,
So I don't know.
So that's it. Some of my heartburn is going away as far as having the town meeting, but I'm just not sure I'm going to be able to support it unless you can bring up some ways that that the town's not going to be 400 grand in debt for the next 20 years for this piece of property, so that we can.
Well, I think that the issue would be if we don't decide not to go forward with it, this land could be sold for market prices. Now, I'm not saying that we would necessarily be made completely whole. It's not without risk. There's not much in life that has no risk.
Right.
There might be some risk, that there would be closing costs or whatever. On the other hand, although the price per buildable lot has been relatively stable for the last 10 years, land is something that they don't make more of. And so the cost, it may actually, the going price may go up, in which case we may be able to, neither you nor I know what will happen in 2 years or a year. And we may be able to actually sell these parcels for more than we paid for them, in which case there may be no risk, and may have actually been a good exercise.
Any questions on the presentation from my colleagues? The single board clerk.
Well, I just want to clarify or restate one of the things that was in the presentation, that the reason, because I'm also, just full disclosure, I'm also a trustee on SMOT, so I'm sitting sort of both seats right now.
Perfectly acceptable.
The reason SMOT chose the route of borrowing versus going to CPC was so that selling would be unencumbered, because if it's purchased by CPC funds, then it is restricted to the use for which it was purchased. So if we purchase it this way and then work on selling it as unencumbered, as Mike was saying, there's an opportunity for reimbursement there. So it's not that the town would be encumbered for 30 years or 20 years or 40 years from borrowing.
Right, it's just that I would want to make sure that there is some commitment that that bill would get paid down. Not, oh, hey, we built the project, hey guys, you know, all right, the town's gonna be paying this off, because we'll be voting on borrowing the money for a period of time, and until it gets paid off, we own the bill out of tax dollars.
Mr. Selby?
I was just going to suggest that we're essentially having a conversation with Mr. Kaczynski about an issue that we've explored before. I'd actually like to hear what members of the public have to say. There may be something new, and I want to start hearing that.
I'm happy to do that too, because I think I understand where it's going. The presentation was very helpful, and I'm appreciative of putting it forward.
If that's the consensus of the board, then I guess we will go with questions and comments combined from the public at this point, not abrogating your rights to make comments later on, but it just seems to be the way that the public hearing is flowing. But I see a number of representatives of boards and committees in the town. Does anyone want to speak before the members of the general public on questions or comments on the proposals that they've just heard?
Quince is a member of
Quince is a
SMART.
member of SMART. So actually, I guess you're right. I'm sorry, Quince. You can speak too. Why don't you please identify yourself
Quince
again?
Papa, nice to see you. I am a member of SMART. I live at 279 Hudson Road.
Thank you.
I would like to say that as a member of a board of the town, that we do have a fiduciary responsibility to the town, to protect the town money, so that, to your concern, that we're not going to take this money that is developed or used by the town, the units are going to be sold, we're going to pay down the loan. I mean, that would be the first and foremost thing that we do. So that's our responsibility to the town. So I don't understand where your concern is that this money would be hanging out there as a loan for 20 years.
I'm just concerned about the mechanism more than anything else, as well as a commitment that the income will be used to pay this off.
The income is from the sale of the units.
Yep.
And it would go towards paying down the loans.
Can I add something in terms of the mechanism? If the project is found feasible and the pro forma works and there is funds available, an RFP, a request for proposals, will be sent out to identify a developer. Whoever picks that up will have to follow all the obligations of it. And if that includes to pay back the town X amount of money, they will have to follow that. So there's way to ensure that process.
All right, any other boards or committees? I see capital planning, I see FinCom, I see CPC. Do you have any questions or comments at this stage?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jelinek. The order of business now is to turn it over for questions, and I guess at this point, comments on the presentation from SMART and its architect to the general public. You guys didn't come here for nothing, did you?
I gave up a board meeting.
Yeah.
But I'm not speaking as a board member. I'm speaking as an abutter. My name is Lenny Golder, 67 Old Bolton Road. And I'm speaking as an abutter, not any board that I represent. And as I've commented before, I support the concept to have affordable housing. I support the concept to have affordable housing. I could see, the possibility of some affordable housing on that proposed land. I am concerned on two fronts, three fronts actually. One, in terms of the finances, the proposal would leave the town about $1 million, in debt, and to recoup that kind of money from taxes from these parcels would take something like, I estimate something like at least 20 years. So I think that's a lot of money for the town to absorb. I think that, you know, as has been suggested, if this project is workable, then CPC would be the best way to go. An alternative would be, at least if the town is going to go forward with taxpayer money, to at least have somebody, some kind of expertise involved that has experience in reselling land if this proposal doesn't go. But I would feel much more confident with CPC money. And the other issue, and this ties in both with finances and the project itself, I think this is a lot of development. I think something scaled down would be more workable. It would be more cost effective. I do like the fact that there was some proposal there for a duplex, but I think that's really what should be built. Duplexes, not single standing units, because that is more cost effective. As far as location, and this is where, you know, I get into the issues, you know, more in terms of the neighborhood, and, you know, where I live and where other people live. I think that's a lot in terms of siting to put on Old Bolton Road. There is room on the other side, on Great Road, to put some housing units. Two duplexes, one on Lot A and one on Lot C, for example, would be have much less of an impact. There is housing now on Great Road, so I've heard the argument that this is not a good place for building housing, but the housing does exist on Great Road, and we do have landscaping abilities. I don't see why that would be a problem. At the same time, in terms of putting it on Old Bolton Road, I think one of the lots, it was Lot C if I'm not mistaken, called for putting two units right on that same frontage. Now I realize because it's affordable that there's some leeway here, but if this were not an affordable proposal, this wouldn't pass town zoning bylaws. You need 200 feet of frontage for each unit, and as I understand it, unless I'm mistaken, you're calling for two units with the same 200 feet of frontage. And as I say, in terms of traditional zoning, that wouldn't pass. I also see that there seems to be more development on Lot C than Lot A. I don't know why. Lot C is actually where, if I'm not mistaken, there's more of the tree farm, and I think that's where, you know, we'd want to keep certainly want to keep that tree farm preserved if we could possibly, because that's what makes it Chapter 61 to begin with. That's what gives it some kind of an agricultural component. So, in short, I'd feel much more comfortable with CPC money, or at least some kind of plan to resell, and something much more scaled down, something that would call for development on Great Road as opposed to Old Bolton Road.
Are there any questions that you?
Well, just two things, is that this is one concept, and those houses could be sited on Great Road. The idea was partly to, if the houses were put closer to Great Road, more of the vegetation that's currently there would need to be removed in order to have access to the back part. So part of the idea was to have it closer to Old Bolton Road so that the back part, it could certainly be, and from a safety perspective, it makes more sense to access from Old Bolton Road than Great Road in terms of the speed and that kind of stuff, and school buses and all that kind of stuff. So it makes much more sense to do it from this side for access. So the idea was to keep it closer to that road and leave more of the back part as, you know, as a tree farm. As it looks now, it would look very similar from Great Road. There also there's equal number of units on both, just like to point that out. And the third thing is that the alternative is not that it's going to stay in chapter. It's going to be sold to somebody who's going to put up housing there, and that's the proposal. Is somebody who's going to buy that as a developer who's going to put up houses there. So the alternative is not, oh, gee, shouldn't we keep it a tree farm? It's going to be, there's going to be two probably pretty big houses there. So that's the alternative.
That's right.
I just point of clarification, I think, because Lenny was talking about two buildings on each or 2 houses on each lot. It's actually 2 buildings, and each one is 2 dwelling units, as it says up there, so that there's actually 4 dwelling units per lot.
Correct.
So, just to make sure that everybody understood.
Can I just respond to the comments that Mike made about the...
Sure, I'll let you finish your
Okay, thanks.
your scheme.
In terms of the tree farm, as I understand, most of the tree farm faces Old Bolton Road, not Great Road. And in terms of Great Road is in terms of access, for people. Like I say, we do have housing on Great Road, so I mean there is a safety measure, that can be taken to put housing on Great Road.
Anyone else with questions and
Can I
comments?
clarify something? It is true that the number of units that are proposed would not meet zoning regulation. That we are aware of it, and that will be a process of a friendly 40B where we will have to ask the zoning board to relieve some of the zoning requirements. So you're right that the number of units by current zoning are not allowed, but there's way to seek a variance for that. And one of the biggest arguments, the way to do it is by proposing affordable housing.
Yeah, and I'm not questioning the legality of it.
Yeah, no, I'm
Okay.
just clarifying that. And as far as, access on one road or the other, I'm sure that will be part of the process if we were to have, access to the property to develop and all that. Same thing with the location of the building. Right there, they're pretty much aligned with the existing buildings, a little bit further back, but,
Let's get some new voices in here. Everybody will be heard from. As long as we don't get repetitive, everyone will get a chance. I saw you first, sir.
How you doing? Dan Hart, 85 Old Bolton Road. A few things with regards to town bylaws, like, I know we're getting waivers for the town bylaws, but duplexes are supposed to be consistent with like the single-family residence in the neighborhood. So I don't see that as necessarily being consistent with the single-family residences. Second, on your own town website, the reason why we have a minimum of 1.5 acres is we want to make sure we conserve water resources as well as, waste removal, disposal for Title V. I understand that, but I'm in a butter. I don't necessarily, you want to all of a sudden find out hey, water's getting scarce. That's why we have a minimum 1.5 acres for single-family zoned residence area. As far as using town money, I'd be 100% against it. I understand there's possibilities of appreciation, but there's also possibilities of depreciation. I don't know how you're factoring in if there's any litigation, and who handles litigation if someone wants to try to fight this. Is it the town? Is it who handles litigation?
The town does.
Okay, so the town would handle litigation, so there's more costs that's not included. I know that we obviously lost, that case was last year, with the water resource overlay, I just want to say I don't want to waste money, on things that I just don't want to waste money. Let's put it that way. Those are a few of the concerns.
None of us do either, sir. We just want to make sure that we try to reach by consensus rather than threat of litigation. Mike, do you have any thoughts on the water availability and the water table? I know it's too early for you to do anything.
Well, next week we'll know more, but essentially any development would have to pass the Board of Health for septic, for water, and the normal, and actually as a shared well, I think there's a slightly higher standard in terms of the setbacks from other wells and other septics. So, being that it's a shared water resource. So we'd have to, any development would not, if by definition not endanger anyone else.
And that's not something that you get a friendly 40B waiver on.
No, that's not.
One at a time. Ma'am, I heard you, or saw you at least next. Sorry. Maybe it's because you're standing. Thank you very much for standing, everyone who's standing.
I'm just worried about the location
Name and
of it.
address, please.
Christine, Old Bolton Road.
Christine. Yes.
I'm worried about locating it across from the park. It's a very heavily trafficked area. Springtime, that park is packed every night with baseball games. Now you're gonna have more traffic coming out of those developments. Plus, people fly down that road all the time from Maple Street and Old Bolton Road. There's no yield signs from Maple Street to Old Bolton Road. I don't know how afraid I am to send my kids down Old Bolton Road and crossing over where that little island is to go to the park. Like, I hold my breath every time because people drive like crazy around there. I don't think it's gonna help the traffic situation. You know, someone said about the school buses. School buses go back and forth there all the time, you know? I just think I don't think that this area can absorb another complex like that. It's already so busy. Soccer season in the fall, packed with cars all the time in that park, along the road. I mean, I just don't think we can absorb that. And if there were 2 houses there instead, I think that would be more reasonable. And if, you know, that's the alternative.
That's more of a comment, but I'll let you address it if you want, Mike.
Traffic studies would be done it's just in the normal planning process. Traffic studies would be done and appropriate parking would be there, and that would be part of the input that we would ask for in the design process. Again, this is a I would say straw man, but the idea is that this has been proposed as a possibility, and if the town is willing to trade more cost per unit for less density, that's a perfectly appropriate trade-off.
Let's see, ma'am, please.
Carol Payo, 111 Old Bolton Road. So I have mostly a comment. I'll second some of the things that people have said, but one thing it seems like there's an awful lot of uncertainty about this project because I understand there's a time limit in order to get the property. But we're hearing about, well, maybe this and maybe 4 units. It could go, you said it could go less. It probably can go higher as well. And the concerns I would have at this point is the town is being asked to make a decision, a financial decision, a decision that affects that area of Old Bolton Road with really very little information. Most of the things are, well, this is a straw man and there's going to be a lot of decisions that have to be made. And I'm concerned about committing funds and changing something that we have so little information about at this time and losing the ability later to affect that. I will also just second in terms of that this feels like an awful lot of additional units to put on a road that really is all, single-family homes and traffic. It's a small road. It already has that park there that brings in a lot of traffic. It feels to me like an awful lot to add, even if it were exactly that. There's a comment. I guess I don't have a question, but the uncertainty of this makes me very uncomfortable.
Yes, ma'am.
I have Liz Mosley, 32 Maple Street. I have kind of a slash comment question. If the town does not buy these 2 parcels of land and they are bought by a developer, could an unfriendly 40B go in and the town would have less control over what was going there?
Who is this being sold to?
It's irrelevant, really. Yeah, it's a valid question, and we don't know.
We don't know.
Well,
I thought
is the answer theoretically yes?
Theoretically, yes.
I don't even know.
It's, from a financial perspective, it seems unlikely.
It's more likely to be
One at a time.
more likely to be a large single family or bedrooms. That'd be my opinion.
I just thought we might have some information on the proposed purchaser.
Did you hear his answer, Mick?
Did you get that, Liz?
We have an answer here.
Oh, thank you.
Nancy Moran, I'm a realtor selling the property. It is a builder who plans on building 2 single-family homes.
Ah, thank you. And your address?
It's 4 Eileen Ave, Clinton, Mass.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being patient.
Margie Lynch, 27 Boxborough Road. And I'm sitting here taking in all this great information, and it strikes me that the presentation of the concept plan is in some ways confusing the issue. What I believe the selectmen are being asked to vote on today is whether to exercise their right of first refusal to purchase these properties, and then it would advance to town meeting to vote on. So that discrete $410,000 transaction. And on the one hand, voters do have a right to know what their ultimate full investment might be. But on the other hand, assuming this affordable housing project were to proceed, voters would have a chance to vote on that. There would be detailed plans, detailed costs, and all of these very important issues would be aired and vetted. So, one, does this seem like a reasonable site to consider for affordable housing? Seems like it to me. It's flat. It's across the street from a park. How awesome is it that kids could walk across the street and play in the park? There's a sidewalk system there. There's a precedent for density in the neighborhood. There are 2 roads to provide options for access to the site. So seems to me like it's at least worth advancing to voters tonight, to town meeting, to air these issues more fully and vote on. And then if voters, in their collective wisdom, decide to advance the issue, we'll be able to dig into all these really important issues as to whether it's in, and it sounds like, you know, the option that SMOD is proposing gives the town some opportunity to take other actions if the project isn't supported, i.e. sell it. So seems like it has some merit, at least I think from my perspective.
Thank you, Margie. Actually, ma'am, I saw you next.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. And
First, your name and address, please.
Ann Guerin, 135 Old Bolton Road.
Thank you.
Are we to assume that we are going to vote tonight as a group?
No.
Okay. Or a motion to accept the town's proposal to buy this? Is this going to be decided here to go?
I'll take your question as a point of order, or a point of information. And what will be happen after we've taken all the comments that aren't repetitive, that are helpful, we will vote to close the hearing. Then the board will deliberate after whether or not to exercise our right of first refusal as a town to purchase these 2 parcels. At that point, the matter would then, if it was, and I'm not trying to prejudge it, if my colleagues voted in favor of this, then it would advance to town meeting on July 10th, at which time it would come up before your fellow community members for a vote on whether to purchase land and whether or not to incur indebtedness, $410,000, to purchase that land. And that would be a 2/3 vote at town meeting on both of those questions. Does that answer your questions?
It does. That's another part of the question because, again, there is no sidewalks there. And I agree with the others. There is a safety concern. There's a lot of traffic on that road. And I'm concerned with the water situation, as all the abutting residents are. And I don't want to see us incur any more tax base than we already have.
Hey, we are going to get some more information on water. Yes,
Karen Gray, 12 Pine Point Road. I think it might be possible to get some more discussion of what the 40B law requires of the town of Stow and why we were anxious to bring the numbers up of affordable units.
well, Mike, you can always give us chapter and verse on that.
Well, I gotta bring that back out of memory. We're currently at the 40B statute encourages towns to increase the total population of the affordable portion of their total housing stock to 10%. The idea is to is kind of aimed at towns outside of Boston, in the 128 to Worcester area that have what it used to be considered snob zoning of 2 acres per parcel, to increase density so that more people can live in those areas at an affordable rate. And that was the original intent. So the idea is that if a town is below 10%, there are certain elements of the zoning that can be waived if you propose a development which 25% of the total units are affordable. So if you want to build 4 units, one of them has to be affordable. If you want to build 20 units, then 5 of them have to be affordable. And if you do that, if you say, well, I'm going to take 25% and make them affordable based on the federal rules for income limits, et cetera, then there are certain elements of the setbacks and frontage and road frontage and other elements that can be waived to put there are certain elements that can't, which would be safety, water, septic, and there's something else, I can't remember what else, but there are the normal things that would be constraining development in that regard that has a big impact on like other people's wells or other people's septics, that kind of stuff. That stuff all has to be adhered to. And so we're at 7.1%. We need another, I think, 72 units to reach 10%. That is going to be very difficult to do because we would, in every 10 years, the number goes up again. So as we approach 2020, the number will go up from right now being 2,100, 10% of 2,100, which is 210. It'll probably go up to about 2,300 because that'll be the current census, and so that means the number will go 20 higher. At some point, we'll be closer to 100 units that will be required. A more makeable unit is that if we get 0.5%, or in this case 12 to 13 units per year, we can have a year of safe harbor that would be equivalent to the 10%, meaning that you could not propose a 40B, or a 40B development could be proposed, but it could be rejected
By someone else.
By someone else.
An unfriendly 40B.
An unfriendly 40B could be.
So a developer, if we don't meet the 10% or the safe harbor, someone else could come in and do something.
So, you can picture your favorite piece of open land that you like to look at and picture it with a lot of houses there, and that's what can happen if we don't have control over zoning. Does that
answer your question,
Thank you.
Karen? Sorry, Mr. Ryan, sure.
I think just a bit of clarification. I think Mike was way too nice when he said some of the stuff can be waived. I think what people need to understand is a developer can come in and insist the stuff be waived. It's not that the town necessarily wants to do it. It's because they are proposing a certain amount of affordable units, you will waive the zoning. So Mike said it way too nicely, but I think
Thank you. That was better said. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well,
And that's what we're trying to prevent.
we don't want to be too nice. You and then Mr. Mpong.
Okay. Brian, can you pass these out, please?
Name, please, and address.
Helen Rizzo, 49 Old Bolton Road.
Thank you very much.
Record if anything else stands rolling. In 2004, Carol and Al Scanzaroli had an offer to purchase the property for $1.3 million. It was, the offer came from John McMahon of Chester, Chestnut Realty in Lexington, Massachusetts. What happened with the offer was that it failed because the proposal was for a small project for 4 units per well, for 4 units. Now, they went to the state, if you read the letter, this was rejected, and the offer was declined, and the man got his money back. Do you have anything to Brian?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike, you should take a look at this if you haven't already. It's just for the record, it's a letter dated August 11, 2004 to Katie Fisher, whom we all know. It was, I suppose, from what I can gather from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am, is that an offer was made for purchase of 49 Old Bolton Road.
Right, I have the offer here.
No, just tell me if I'm getting it wrong. Don't.
No, that's fine.
49 Old Bolton Road, which is where on that map? The center. And it was withdrawn because, if I'm stating this correctly, if I'm reading it correctly, that there was no possibility of installing a well on that middle property that would meet the state requirement for the proposed project.
And that was for 6.8 acres.
It was for the
This is
entire
only.
That was
for all the
That was
parcels.
the
Oh, wait,
entire parcel. This is
One
only
at-
for 3.
Like I said, I can only listen and think and talk 2 out of 3 of those, so I need to have everybody, respect everybody else when they're talking. What were you saying, ma'am?
That was for the whole parcel, 6.8 acres.
I see, A, B, and C.
And that, and this is only for A and C. And if it couldn't be done for a whole parcel, how can it be done for that?
Well, if it can, it won't. That's what Mr. Kaminsky would say to you, but we don't know
Well,
that
it
yet.
already says that Acton,
Do you know how big the proposed project was in 2004?
the engineer.
4 units?
It's for this property, this property, this property, this property.
Your
There's
name,
only
sir?
2 parcels.
4 houses.
Brian Scansby.
There's only 2 parcels that
The
are.
owner's son.
Things may have changed since 2004. That's all I can think of, but
That's why we do engineering studies. I don't know. That's not my area.
I thank you for bringing this to our
It's
attention.
not enough for a septic system. I talked to John Farnsworth, who developed this plan, and he said that you'd have to have a waste disposal system, and that's really expensive. It can be on a smaller scale, but it's still very expensive.
How-
Mr. Chair?
Yes, one second. Just let me follow this up, though. But somebody's buying,
He's
willing
only
to buy A
building
and
one-
C.
Yeah, he's building one house, an acre and a half, and one house, the acre and a half on A, one house on C. That's not 4 units. It's not, it's just one family on each side.
Was this a 4-unit offer?
Yes, it was. I have it right here.
Okay, no, thank you. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make that clear for myself. Yes, Ms. Ingeborg Clark.
So I think this is very helpful to SMOT. And if you have any other information, that'd be great, I guess. I don't want to put the Realtor on the spot, but have you done Title V test pits yourself
Yes,
yet?
I have.
No, not, I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak to the seller's rep, but,
Yes, the builder has done Title V.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, I told Mr. Mung you'd be next.
Yeah, Steve Mong, 70 Old Bolton Road. As I understand, the purpose of this meeting isn't to necessarily hash all this out, is whether or not you folks decide to bring it to the rest of the town, where we'll have more information. So I want to just urge you that we have this opportunity. It is a short time span. There are a lot of questions. I think there will be time, many of them will be answered, but I think the town, at town meeting, should have the opportunity to vote on this to see if the town would like to have it. And I urge you to support it, to bring it to town meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? New, I'm sorry, I haven't heard from you, sir, yet.
John Giordano, Heritage Lane. I just kind of question the value of these 2 lots. They're basically only acre and a half lots. You're going to try to put 4 units on it with a 4-unit septic and a public shared well. So I question the value of $200,000 for basically a small lot. It's just basically a building lot, just barely a building lot. Versus, I guess my main question is, does SMART look at other properties, or I think there's other properties on the market that maybe have better value or more feasible to work with. I know there's a property on Red Acre Road that's 50 acres that's been for sale for quite some time, that's $500,000. And to me, it would seem that this proposal would be more of something for, at a place like that, where you've got 50 acres you can work with, you've got plenty of room to get your septics and your wells in, and you're not jamming 4 units on an acre and a half lot. So that's just where I question the value of the lots also, as far as, because they're in 61A, but I don't feel the town should be real estate speculating, buying the lots and then figuring we can sell them in a couple of years, because we're gonna have to pay a commission to a real estate agent. And as others have mentioned, if the value of the property goes down, then we lose money there too. So I guess that's just my comment on it, as far as if they look at other viable properties in town that necessarily aren't 61A, that would be more feasible for something like this.
All right, thank you. Any other new comments? Oh, let's see. I haven't heard from you, ma'am.
I have a question about wetlands.
First name and address.
I have heard that there are wetlands.
Name and
First name and address.
Oh, Ellen Winthrop, 67 Old Bolton Road.
Thank you. What was your question?
I have a question about wetlands on the property. Is that part of the buildable equation, buildable land equation? Has anyone factored that in? Are there maps that show wetlands?
There is, the wetland protection area, I believe, stops short of, I think it crosses the right, can't remember, this was in part of the
Conservation.
the conservation, right, sorry. I should defer to my fellow trustee, because you had a, but that would be part of, the build-up, where the houses are proposed is outside of the wetland protection area, I believe.
Yeah, and that would be confirmed, though, as part of this process, whether there's any wetlands on the site. At present, we're
course.
aware that, but there's,
Of course.
at present, we're aware that it's close, but not on, but it's something we have to check.
Yeah.
Is there a map that shows the wetlands? I haven't been able to obtain one yet. We don't have a map. No map.
Planning
No
board.
regulatory maps that show. Well, there's Mass GIS, Oliver, that kind of stuff, but that's very broad scale. So an on-site map, we do not have.
Wetlands kind of, it's hard to identify and sometimes they migrate. New voice.
Dick Karen, 135 Old Bolton Road. I have an acre and a half, and probably an acreage is kind of wet in the back of the house that abuts along Great Road. Can I go ahead and fill it in? I'd
No.
really like to fill it in.
Why don't you go to the Conservation Commission and get the requisite permits, but we're not in a position to grant any kind of
I just want to know,
permitting.
if we're going to let these guys do it, I want to do it.
No wetlands can be filled as part of this
It's not
process.
wetlands, it's not a wetlands map.
What I'm saying is that the site would be reviewed. If there are wetlands on the site, to answer your question, no, they can't be filled. And it is, to answer your other question, no, it's not part of the developable area. And there are setbacks that cannot be waived as part of the 40B process. Okay, so.
That was the fourth one.
That's the fourth one?
Thank you, that was the fourth.
Thank you, Ms. Ingbrook. I'll go back to you, sir, again.
I was just, with regards to the costs to the town, I know that with litigation, like for instance, with the Reynolds decision, do we know the cost to the town for that?
Not off the top of our head, sir.
Was it pretty substantial?
I cannot comment, but.
Smart paid it.
Pardon?
Smart paid it.
Smart paid it, I did you that much. But we're trying to reach consensus. Yes, ma'am.
Karen Cummings, 74 Old Bolton Road. I heard the concept of a shared well being talked about, and I was curious, is that shared for both parcels, one well and one septic treatment? And does that mean there'd be some kind of easements going across somewhere to make that happen? Or, because in terms of economies of scale, it seems like it'd be very expensive to have these, disparate parcels having shared wells and kind of complicated septic treatment.
Without any engineering, we'll think that it will be one well, one septic on each parcel.
That's pretty expensive.
That's why your numbers are up there.
Yes.
And when we did the numbers, I was like, what? But anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
Melissa Coolidge, 563 Gleasondale Road. I'm wondering what the timetable is for the process and determining water.
I'm sorry if I was coughing over that. I'm getting over a bad summer cold, so I do apologize. Did everyone hear that? Please, I'm sorry, would you say it again?
I'm wondering what the timetable is for getting the perk tests and ascertaining whether or not you have water.
The Neshoba Board of Health gave us a date of the 20th, which is a week from today. So the tests will be done under the direction and supervision of the Neshoba Board of Health, and we should have a report within a few days after that. So certainly before any town meeting, but we didn't have control, unfortunately. We wanted to have the data before this, but we couldn't get in line.
Cool, is that all right?
Yes.
I'll take from a new person. Frank, go ahead.
Peter McManus, 71 9 Acre Road. I think I have a CPC question, really. So I
I don't know if we have any representatives of that.
Right in front of you.
Could you go back to the numbers slide?
Sure.
What I'm wondering is if we really should count on any kind of soft money softening up that 410. So CPC, assuming everything is forward, you're proposing that they're not involved in the initial acquisition, then they would be involved in the construction costs.
Possibly.
Possibly. Well said. Theoretically, they might be involved in.
It's a theoretical possibility.
Okay. Which would involve the hard costs and then sales revenue of the 1.4 million. So I'm wondering if they actually would be agreeable to that, theoretically. We have a subsidy number per unit. We'd be effectively asking them to pay above what is clearly determined is the subsidy rate. So just want to get at if that's a possibility. I don't, in my mind, I would guess it's not, but for some of that to come back and reduce it. But just so therefore, should we just be talking about 410 and not wondering if it's actually a lower number? So I don't know if CPC, how they would look at this, how much they would be asked, if they would put up all the costs. It seems to me that probably the town or SMART would do some short-term construction borrowing, and then bond with whatever's left at the end. So I'm just wondering if we can get a feel from CPC if it really is realistic for that 410 number to be reduced.
So the 410 number is not going to be reduced.
I mean, in the end.
In the end.
I understand.
So we could, as part is using the Habitat, the recent Habitat is that essentially Habitat asked, as the developer, asked CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, for those funds. It wasn't for X amount per unit, and that was not the town, that wasn't SMOT, that wasn't the town asking CPC, that was the developer that was chosen to develop affordable housing was asking it. So when we would put an RFP out, one of the constraints about the RFP would be a total budget, which would include, at least in part, or possibly completely, the land acquisition cost would be part of the total budget. And so that would be part of the total budget. That would be, CPC money could not be used for that, but it could be used to offset many of the other expenses. As you see, 410,000 versus 200, there's 2.6 million, 2.7 million almost there. So the land acquisition is relatively smaller percentage of that. So the total budget would have to be covered, and we would only use CPC funds on the things that could be used and reimbursed for CPC. The only thing it couldn't be used is the 410,000. So that would be.
I thought there was a discussion earlier, possibly.
Some of looking at the total budget, we would essentially, the subsidy we would shift most of the subsidy to the CPC, and then take the money that we took in separately, like a separate same pair of pants, separate pocket. The money that was taken in for the sale of the house could be used to defray the cost of the 410. I mean, it would be of the borrow.
All right.
Or maybe I would just.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves on possible financing schemes. It is interesting and it is worthwhile, but maybe we should be focusing on the question about should we exercise our right of first refusal, because I don't think we're going to get an answer from CPC tonight.
I understand. I'm just wondering if it seemed to be in the discussion that the net number might eventually be lower than 410. I'm just wondering if we should not think of it that way.
No, it's 410. I think that's the fair thing, is that we're talking about borrowing $410,000 for acquisition of land.
Might it be better to look at it that CPC might reduce that subsidy number of 1.2 million?
Correct.
They may fund other costs. And
that would be the one. That would be the ask.
Yeah.
The 1.2 million.
Yeah, so that might go down.
I'd like to bring this to a close. New person?
Kathleen Powell, on Old Bolton Road. I'd like to remind or reiterate that the question here is whether we'd like this to come forward to the town meeting. I think the town's goal of increasing the affordable housing stock is a laudable one and one we should be looking forward. And whether, the question is, are these lots appropriate for them? Is it a feasibility at this location? There are a lot of unanswered questions, but that's the nature of this process. We just have to make the decision with incomplete knowledge. And I think the right thing to do is to continue to work to get the information we need and bring this to town meeting. I understand concerns about traffic, I understand concerns about density, but I lived on Old Bolton Road for a while, and in terms of traffic, I think introducing the park brought the traffic, and adding a few more houses on that street aren't going to make that much more difference.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like the town to make a decision with complete knowledge when we can.
Thanks very much. Margie, real quick.
Yeah, my quick question is, has anyone calculated the debt service on the $410,000?
About $10 a year.
That's, yeah, the soft cost should account for it, but again, it's a ballpark.
Okay. Yep.
Stephen Quinn, 67 Whitman Street. I just have a question on the town's philosophy for developing housing in general. These 8 units.
How long do we have?
Yeah. Maybe we should have a public hearing on that.
These 8 units for 152 grand. If you gave 8 families 152 grand, they wouldn't need affordable housing. But the 1.2 million that I just wonder, would that be money better invested into subsidizing something like Plantation or Pilot Grove, where I think for 30 units, I'm not counting the cost of land, I think it was a $5 or $6 million project.
19 million. It was a $19 million project, of which we put in 1.8 million.
To me, that's a better bang for the buck than trying to go out and develop small little parcels, because the subsidies.
We hear your comment, Steve, but in the philosophical question is something for a later day. We've got one item, agenda item, just let me finish my thought. One agenda item on for tonight, and that's what we're going to stick to. But I understand SMOT needs people, if you want to, and you've just gotten off the planning board.
Recently become available.
Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Brokaw.
So that question comes up, and you raised it as well. And what SMOT does, it's our responsibility, speaking now as a trustee, that whenever a parcel comes up, we believe we need to evaluate whether it's feasible and whether it's not. We would love, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for reminding that. I mean, some of your questions would be great if you had time and wanted to work with us. I think we'd love to have you work with us, SMOT. Because what we do is every time a 61A parcel comes up, we look at it, we evaluate it, and we see if we can exercise it. There's always pros and cons, and the process, as you've heard tonight, is a difficult one. But so this is part of SMOT's due diligence, and so what we're doing is having these public hearings, investigating what we can, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. So it's always a reactive situation, which makes SMOT look kind of dumb sometimes, but that's the position that SMOT's in, and we would love to have more people come that may have other ways of thinking or creativity, so just think about it.
Steve, we'll expect your letter of interest to Maureen by the end of this week.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more public? Yeah. Not going over new ground. Or not going over old ground.
Ask the realtor, tell us what kind of houses are being proposed to be built.
Do you know how many bedrooms at least?
No, that's part of the uncertainties of the process. Yes, Tom?
Yeah. Actually, I think what, the comment that Steve made is probably something that we do need to look at. Doesn't have anything to do with this right now, but we probably should should be having those discussions in the future.
No, I don't want to have those discussions.
No, we
right
don't
now.
have it now. I was just saying that I know that Jesse Stedman, the town planner, is beginning the process of a master plan. So our master plan is about 6 or 7 years old now, I believe, and this type of development, based on a number of surveys that we did in the past, is what the town prefers. Town has said that they don't want big developments of 100 houses. They want infill development all around the town, and I think it's inefficient and it's expensive, but the town, that's the feedback that we've gotten from the town. The master plan is going to be, as soon as the Lower Village stuff, as soon as they're not swamped by the Lower Village stuff, they're gonna start back a process of master planning, and I think that's one of the.
I get off just in time.
There you go, exactly, and the question, and that question is gonna be addressed, because this is terribly expensive and terribly inefficient, to do it this way, but we are fulfilling what the town has asked us, what the town has said to do.
I've already started a process going with Laura about maybe some long-term planning. But right now, Steve, we'll just expect your letter of interest now that you're off planning board. Anything else that's earth-shattering that needs to be said tonight that hasn't already been said? All right, then I'll accept a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the public hearing for the Chapter 16-1A property at 49 Old Bolton Road be closed.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. All right, you're welcome to stay, but right now, the board will now deliberate in public.
Sure, can I leave it on
Why
this
don't we
computer, or you
just
want
wait until it's you?
Okay, great. If you don't hear from me, please remind me.
Okay, sure will. Change retaining to stone.
Right there.
And I had it written on the drawings.
Grab that guy.
Did I?
You know what else? You called it Bolton Road. And I'm sorry, I didn't hear it when you were looking over what you told me.
Yeah, no, but I should
You had a
have.
question about assessors. Didn't you at the last meeting, you had a question? All right, we'll get. All right. Okay, that's okay. I wasn't gonna take it now, but we'll get back to you about a question you had. Okay.
I know the retaining wall is, I don't know why I keep calling it.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't ask it again. Yeah, I asked the town administrator to run that down. I appreciate it. Sorry we're going long. All right, guys, folks, we'd like to get to our deliberations. Let's quiet down. If you're gonna talk, you can take it outside, but we have to conduct our deliberations and based upon the feedback and the information that we just received. And to start things off, I will take a motion. Mr. Salvi.
On the right of the first
Yes,
refusal,
that's I think the first thing we have to do. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, whereas the town received notice of the intended sale of certain land on Old Bolton Road currently subject to Chapter 61A, and, this is quite the motion, whereas this board held a required public hearing regarding the town's potential acquisition of the property pursuant to an option or right of first refusal under Chapter 61A, Section 14, and whereas a vote by this board to exercise the town's option or right of first refusal is necessary to enable a town meeting vote on whether to acquire the property, and is further necessary to provide timely notice to the property owners of the town's exercise of said option or right of first refusal. I move that the Board of Selectmen exercise the town's options or rights of first refusal under Chapter 61A, Section 14, to meet the bona fide offers to purchase the following land: Assessors Maps R348, 49 Old Bolton Road, and Assessors Maps R348A, 49 Old Bolton Road. And that the town administrator be authorized to work with town council to take any actions necessary to exercise such options or rights of first refusal under Chapter 61A, Section 14.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Aubie. Do I have a second?
Second.
You can have it. Give it to Ms. Ingeborg Clark. All right, thoughts from my colleagues or discussion? Mr. Ryan got his hand up first.
He did.
Would you like?
Go.
I was gonna say that I think we'd be, if we weren't gonna be having a town meeting. It's funny because this thing's come around 3 ways to Sunday. At this point, I probably would be voting not to exercise our right of first refusal if we didn't already schedule a town meeting. However, we scheduled it. If we didn't have the other articles on there, I would probably say, let's stop moving forward at this point. However, given that we have other business that's pressing that we're going to have to do, I'm okay with letting it take it to the next level and taking it to town meeting. I would not, at this point, I probably wouldn't be supportive of taking this to town meeting by itself, but because we're going to have one, I'm okay with it.
Ingeborg Clark.
I am in favor of exercising the town's option to evaluate the potential taking of this property and continuing to investigate its developability. And I appreciate some of the information we received tonight, and I think that will be part of SMART's discussions.
Mr. Salvi.
I thought some of the comments we got, the ones from Ms. Lynch, Mr. Mong, Ms. Pavlicek, I thought they were right on the money. That the question we really have tonight is whether to go forward to town meeting and to let town meeting make the decision on this. Now, based on what we heard tonight, I mean, this project's going to have its share of challenges. It's got some unusual aspects. We've discussed those at length. The use of general fund monies, the, I'll call it transactional risk of if we have to sell it. Some siting concerns, traffic concerns, but, you know, I gotta ask myself, do I deprive town meeting of the right to hear all of this stuff? And is it impossible? Is it impossible that town meeting says, yep, heard all that stuff, understand it, want to do it? I don't think that's impossible. So I feel like we should move it forward. I haven't heard anything so off the wall that we should deprive town meeting of the right of taking a vote on it.
Much better said tonight.
Well, I can't add anything to the statements my colleagues just made, so I won't even try. Call for a vote.
I think I have to say something like, all those in favor.
Yeah. Call for a vote. All right, okay.
I know it's late, Brian.
No, wait a minute. I'm just asking if it's all right if I can call for a
Oh,
vote.
yes, of course, of course.
Can I call for a vote?
Please
Do you want me, a motion to?
No, we've already got a motion.
No,
I
please
thought
don't
I
make me
was
do that
gonna say
again.
I'm going to
motion
call
to
for a
call the
vote.
vote.
Calling for the vote.
Call the question.
Call the question.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. Now it's up to the, to your community, to your fellow citizens. You've got to get your side out for town meeting.
And SMART posts its agendas, it's all public.
28th is the next meeting.
And Mike and Quince, thank you guys for putting together the
Thank you.
presentation.
And thank you to your architect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Runford. It was a very great presentation under very tough time constraints. And thank you all who came here and offered public hearing.
May I say something to
Stu.
Mr. Kupczynski and Mr. Ray? At the last meeting on this, I thought for two things. Some kind of cost figures and that you reach out to the community. I'm assuming somebody reached out to the community based on this, everybody's here, and there were cost figures I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
2/3 at town meeting, simple majority at the polls?
Yep.
So, just clear, okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
For any acquisition of land or dedication. Now we need to quickly pick up the special town meeting warrant. Mr. Salvi, will you help us out with a motion?
Certainly will, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the warrant for the July 10th special town meeting dated June 13th, 2017.
Second. Mr. Town Administrator, do you have any thoughts? You could share with us.
What, do you need a hand? You got,
All right, we'll hold off. We'll hold off.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, anything about the town meeting warrant that we should know about, other than it's already in there? It looks pretty good to me.
No, other than what I mentioned earlier, the figure that you have in the article with regard to the library septic at 35 is now 50, and that will be 50 when it leaves tomorrow to the printer.
Did you favor us with a motion, Mrs. Salviano?
I did, and I believe it was
Do we have a
seconded.
second from?
I thought I seconded.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a motion's been made and seconded to accept the warrant, Mr. Chairman.
And I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Now we need to, do we need to vote to add a debt exclusion question for funds to purchase Chapter 61A property?
Yes.
We're getting to it, Mr. Town Administrator, one step at a time. We'll get to it.
I'm with you.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 54, Section 42C, I move to place the Town Administrator's ballot question on the debt exclusion for funds to purchase Chapter 61A property located at 49 Old Bolton Road. Quote, shall the Town of Stow be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2 1/2, so-called, the amounts required to pay for the bonds issued in order to fund the costs, including administrative expenses, involved in purchasing the 2 parcels of land on Old Bolton Road voted on at the July 10th special town meeting. One parcel being a portion of a 2.45 acre parcel shown on the Town of Stow Assessor's Map R3 Parcel 8, and that is more particularly described in a deed recorded with the Middlesex South Registry of Deeds in Book 1384, page 559. And the other parcel being a portion of a 3.45 acre parcel shown on the Town of Assessor's Map R3 Parcel 48A, and that is more particularly described in a deed recorded with the Middlesex South Registry of Deeds in Book 29155, page 372, and any other incidental cost related thereto, close quote, on the July 10th special town election ballot.
Second. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Again, unanimous. Now, Mr. Town Administrator, are we going to have something that's going to be recorded at the Middlesex Registry of Deeds, our right of first refusal? Is that it right there?
Yes, that's part of it, and our council is going to take care of that.
So we don't need to sign anything for that?
Well, you don't need to sign anything for that aspect of it. You need to sign the letter that's going tomorrow to the town clerk, which establishes
Gotcha.
holding the special election for that purpose.
So we're all clear on that. Good. I know that we have to talk about convening a June 27 planning board meeting, but let me jump back to the discussion to apply to the Energy Facility Siting Board as an intervener or limited participant. Or anyone here on that? Ah, good, thank you. We took this matter up preliminarily earlier on. I'm not going to rehash what was said, but the general consensus of the board, if I'm not mistaken, is that we will petition the board to be interveners. And not having taken a position, you should keep in mind that Conservation Commission has already submitted public comments. It's the same thing. Did you get a copy? We can get you a copy if you...
I saw it on the EFSB citing document.
Okay, good. Yes, please keep track of that. We also, the planning board also, I believe, took a position tonight. I don't know what it is.
We were down there and trying to have meetings, and they didn't take a position as of when we left. I think they might be waiting for us to
But the only board that can actually, that I think actually will decide is to be an intervener is this board. And our general consensus is that we will be an intervener. We haven't decided a position. We're going to let the facts develop. We're going to keep a tight rein on the litigation costs, and we have one of the smartest guys on this energy stuff that I know, Arnie Epps, that I could possibly know. We'll keep close track of this throughout the process. Anything, but we wanted to hold off the vote until you guys had a chance to come in and say something if you wanted to.
Yep, can I just say that we would like somebody to just watch out for what our worst case scenario is the overhead. And that in all the things that are still going around through the EFSB, that's still on there as the second choice. And that's our worst case scenario. We would prefer under the streets, just because the loss of the trees, wildlife, vegetation, the pouring of the chemicals, there are
cities and towns all over the state who are complaining about the vast amounts of spraying that gets done, and towns don't realize it beforehand, how much is gonna be done.
We're not-
You just do your best to watch out for Gleasondale.
I've always wanted to watch out for Gleasondale. I've always wanted to act as a good neighbor if possible. I always wanted to represent the interests of my town. I'm very gratified that my colleagues tonight are supporting our petition to intervene. And we have yet to decide to take a position. Thank you very much for understanding. Unless there are any other comments, then could I have a motion, Mr. Salvega?
Yes.
Just, Mr. Chair, I'm going to recuse myself.
Oh, yes, I apologize. I'm sorry, I've been so...
I don't think you need,
You don't have to go
I don't
that
think you need
far.
to leave.
You know-
There was no room the other.
You should at least sit, yeah, that's right. Mr. Chairman, I move that the
Could
selectmen...
you change your name as well and your address, just in case you got a little witness protection here?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the selectmen vote to apply to the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities Energy Facilities Siting Board as an intervener, and if established as such, to appoint Town Council Huggins and Witten as the town's representative to serve as intervener for the town of Stow.
And just as a friendly amendment, what I've discussed with Barbara is that we, in the alternative, has to be limited partners, participants, just in case they don't grant the intervener, or we have to step out.
Oh,
Is that all right?
sure.
Will you accept that amendment?
Yes, absolutely. So, Maureen, that would be adding back in and/or limited participant in two places in what I said.
Just follows along your motion.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous consent. Come on back. Thank you. Would you please rejoin us? Thank you for coming. Thank you for waiting so long. I'm sorry. Out of town business this summer. And that brings us back to the discussion vote to convene a public hearing June 27 for the planning board warrant articles, as you've seen in the town meeting. Now, we've already voted to include those warrant items. It'd be a shame not to have the public hearing. I can't think of anyone speaking more intelligently or helpfully than the town administrator already has on those. So, does anyone feel the need to comment further?
I'm confused. Maybe I didn't focus on this. Why do we have to convene a planning board?
Changes to the bylaw.
Changes to the general bylaw.
Am I correct, Mr. Town Administrator?
Yes, we have two changes to make.
Yes, of course, the traffic stuff. Got it. Now I understand.
I didn't mean to rush you, but
No, I'm linking things up in my head.
any other comments, questions? And those are good points, but I just make sure everybody's, questions are answered. Seeing none, could I have another motion from you, Mr. Salvi? You've been so helpful tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board convene a public hearing on Tuesday, June 27th at 7:30 PM at the town building for the purpose of discussing special town meeting warrant articles submitted by the planning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Again, that's unanimous. Mr. Town Administrator, unless anyone else feels the need to keep you any longer, I think you've done yeoman duty
See,
today.
when you mentioned the option right off the bat, now you put me at a disadvantage. We have to start following the
What,
floor.
has anyone can think of I'll do it like Charlie.
I can think of a
Anyone
lot of
think of a reason to keep the town administrator from heading back to the wonderful town of
He
Orange?
has to be here, that's a reason.
That's good.
I don't hear that.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else from my right? Okay. Mr. Town Administrator, thank you for staying. I'm sorry if it was painful.
Now, hey, good job. That's why we pay you all that money. I was gonna give you a raise too. I'm thinking,
Giving you pain is payment enough.
That's right.
Thank you, Bill.
Maureen, I meant to mention this before. Would you just run the book and page numbers again tomorrow morning by Kristen before you hand that into the town clerk on the debt exclusion question? In there it mentions the books and page. I just want to take one.
Okay, yep.
If I can be any help, I'll let you know. I'll communicate with Barbara Huggins about filing that petition on time. Liaison reports.
Nothing.
I can be real quick. I went to a CPC meeting, interesting group, I want to enjoy that. They started a discussion about their priorities, and as I understand it, that basically means, do they want to keep money aside for theoretical projects that might come up rather than just reacting to things as they do come up? There was an interesting discussion a lot of CPC members felt like they don't really set the priorities. The constituent groups do set the priorities. There was a general consensus, I think, that if anyone has gotten short shrift, it's the historical aspect of the Historical Commission, Historical Society. And they basically agreed to kind of follow the capital planning model, which is ask the constituent groups for their priorities and then use that as kind of a 5-year plan. So they're starting down that model. Kind of makes sense. I don't know how CPC tells Open Space Committee what their priorities are.
Do they ask them?
They ask them, and then when they come in with something else, they're able to say, well, what happens if this comes online? And you're able to do it. And there was also a general discussion about SMOT again, about whether SMOT has the ability to go out and talk to landowners. And again, I urged Courtney to talk to town council, because I believe I heard from town council that there is nothing prohibiting that. I think there just might be a communication difficulty.
Maybe we should just run that by the town administrator, because it involves council.
Absolutely. In fact, I think they might have already gotten in trouble for that. So, yes. Yes. Can I mention one other thing? Oh, I wasn't done with my. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just want to say,
Oh.
I think that's a very interesting and worthwhile debate, and you're the right person to help them bring it along, and I'm glad you're on the CPC.
Why? Because I'm not you? Is that why? Because
No, because when I announced that I was
Oh.
not on CPC anymore by an email and that you were replacing me, one of the CPC members wrote out a reply all email that said, "Thank God."
I took it as a
Did
joke.
that really happen?
Yes. It
Oh,
did.
it should.
I took it as a joke.
Enough.
really like
Enough. I'm like Herod the Great. If I cannot make them mourn by my passing, I will make them weep.
Well, I saw. I'll say it off.
I hope somebody got that one. That's a great line. Anyway.
It's great. The only other thing is the planning board is putting together a working group on complete streets, and they're looking to have a general posting for it. So this is something that I am really developing an interest in, is sort of traffic planning, specifically with regard to bicycles. I am actually thinking about putting in a letter. If my colleagues object, particularly if the chairman objects, tell me. I won't do it. I don't need to do this. You could always make me liaison. But I'm really interested in it. If I were the planning board, I'd have a little hesitancy.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
I have a little hesitancy about appointing a sitting selectman, but I figure I might as well throw my hat in the ring. So if you've got any concerns, let me know.
Just a conflict of interest law.
Really?
You can't serve on a board. I don't know from what you're telling me if this meets the criteria, but I think it's 21A says you can't be on a board that reports to this board.
Does the complete, I don't know the complete
I don't know.
Streets working
Just double
group
check
does.
it. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
But
okay.
we serve, my job here is to give the town administrator pain and to serve your curiosity and interest.
That's fine.
Anything
Thank
else
you.
on this side?
No.
Then I will take a motion.
To adjourn, so moved.
Second. All unanimous consent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.